Hello.
Our story begins on Dagobah with Master and Apprentice. Luke stood looking at his X-Wing. Master Yoda was behind him, telling him that the future is always in motion. Going to find his friends would be giving into his attachments, and allowing himself to give into those would be a direct path to the dark side. Luke whipped back around. Yoda hadn't aged terribly in the years since returning to Dagobah. He understood that part of the fall of the Jedi and the Republic was because of complacency. If he continued down that path, then he'd be giving in to what destroyed his order. Yoda's cane was planted into the dirt as he watched young Skywalker prepare a rebuttal. Luke told the former Grand Master that this wasn't giving in to attachments. This was doing the right thing. If he didn't save these people, if he didn't act on what he had seen in his vision, he wouldn't be giving into attachment. He would be accepting that people's lives were at stake here. If Yoda wanted to believe his philosophy regarding the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, that was fine. But these few could change the lives of the many. Leia, Han, Chewie, and the droids, they were leaders of the rebellion. Heroes that redefined their era. They were responsible for the second rise of rebellion after Scarif. Without these rebels, without these leaders, the needs of the few would become the needs of the many, and no Jedi philosophy could deny that importance. If it was Vader or the Emperor who was on Bespin, then they needed to go. This was important for their fight against the dark. Hearing the name Leia pulled Yoda a little more. Luke continued, "If Yoda had been training for this moment, then he shouldn't feel the want to go. He should feel the need to. Yoda was the greatest Jedi Master in all of Jedi history. He didn't just teach prodigies, he oversaw the greatest era of Jedi history. He presided over their golden era, and sure, he was caught up in a plot to destroy their order, but not a soul in the galaxy could have prepared for that." Luke pleaded that both of them go. Yoda sighed. He told Luke that he had seen many travesties in his life. The greatest teacher, he was not. Failure was that greatest teacher. His failures far exceeded his accomplishments, and he understood that. So much negativity had eaten through his little heart that the possibility of actually facing it was daunting. Going to fight Vader was something he should have done decades before. Destroying the Emperor should have been his goal after returning to Dagobah. All simply what-ifs. All of them were things that couldn't be answered now. Yoda looked to Luke and sighed. Great weight fell on his shoulders. He did so much to make sure that the Jedi didn't die with him, and now he could go and take all of his training and do the right thing. Yoda, without verbally saying a word, nodded his head. If the few they were, then they were the right few to save. The duo would go to Bespin. Just don't think about how awkward the flight was. That happens off-screen. When the two of them arrived, they would be too late. Han was captured by Boba Fett and being walked out to Slave 1. Leia and Chewie were escaping from Lando's grasps, and the two Jedi were searching for anyone. They continued walking around. Yoda, despite being more fit, was still on Luke's back so he could get around faster. It worked. The two of them slipped into an adjacent room that led them into the carbon freezing chambers. Yoda leapt off of Luke's back, which he didn't notice. He continued pacing around and lost sight of his little green master. Luke walked further into the chamber and heard a deep, thunderous voice call out to him. The Force was with him, but he was not a Jedi yet. Luke looked up to see the silhouette of Vader and moved in. He didn't know where Yoda was, but the fact that the Grandmaster came here with him told him everything he needed to know. Luke ignited his father's lightsaber and walked up to face the Dark Lord, who was seemingly distracted. Vader was so focused on bringing his son to the dark side of the Force, and yet there was something more. He could sense something else. There was a tug in the Force, something familiar, or someone. It was always close, but yet so intangible. Then he heard it, the ignition of another lightsaber. Vader stepped back, looking for the one that was responsible for this ignition. He found the little green Jedi Master from his adolescent years, Yoda. Vader told Yoda the same thing he told Ben, that he should not have come back. The Grand Master twisted his lightsaber in his hands, looking up at the towering Sith Lord, and telling him that he should have never survived Mustafar. It was dark for a Jedi to say something like that, but so telling of where they were in their relationship. He was a Jedi, and Vader was a Sith, one who had tormented billions through his simple existence, and it was time to stop it. Vader swung forward for Yoda to unleash his speed. It was something that Luke wasn't even ready for. Like a flash of light, Vader's blade was thrown off its course. Luke swung in, joining his master. Vader blocked the strike and forced his hand forward, pushing Luke backwards just enough. Yoda's blade clashed with Vader's as he spun around, using the railing nearby to propel himself through the air. Vader, like he did with his second engagement with Kenobi, slipped into Form 3, which only Yoda could have predicted. He knew that Vader would have chosen such a path to defend himself from ever losing again. Darth stepped back and parried before swinging down, missing Yoda and clobbering the side of the wall, before throwing his blade back and overpowering Yoda, tossing him down towards the carbon chambers themselves. Luke jumped in to save his master. His swings weren't in any specific form, and Vader could prey on that. He took control over the fight without Yoda's presence, and he jabbed at his son, which Luke blocked, but he was thrown around before getting launched down the stairs. Vader jumped after him, and while he was in midair, his body was flung up into the rafters of the ceiling before dropping down into the ground, indenting both. His blade raised to defend himself from the Grand Master, who jumped up the stairs, slamming his Jedi weapon into Vader. He rolled over, trying to avoid a strike that clipped his shoulder. Yoda looked to Luke and told him to go and save his friend. He nodded his head and ran. Darth looked down at his son, and his momentum fell out from under him. But now, he could be 100% focused on getting the kill. Yoda could sense that shift. There was something left inside of Vader. It wasn't much, but it belonged there because of Luke. This shred of hope that someone could love him. This tug in the Force was distracting for Yoda. Luke bolted through the hallways, passing down the corridors he remembered seeing Boba walk down. The bounty hunter was walking onto his vessel with his target captured. He was about to get his credits and plant himself inside of Jabba's palace for some Jawa juice and shows. What a wondrous thought. Working with the Empire and the Hutt cartel was a great way to make some credits, and now he could be set for as long as he desired. He stopped at the edge of the ramp and waited. His eyes scanned the halls, and then he saw a boy running forward. Boba raised his blaster, telling them to put Captain Solo in the cargo hold. Luke shot his blaster and he clipped Boba's shoulder. The clone bounty hunter fired back, but Luke dove out of the way, igniting his lightsaber and blocking the shots from Fett. Boba started to move up the ramp, but Luke had other plans. He closed his eyes, trusting his instincts and the Force, and threw his hands forward. Boba was launched off the ramp and thrown to the edge of the landing platform before slipping off. He obviously used his jetpack to catch himself, but Luke had already run into his vessel, cutting down the two guards who had his friend and pushing the carbonite out of the cargo hold. As he neared the exit, he could hear blaster fire. Boba was on the platform, ducking and avoiding shots as he tried to kill the Wookiee, the princess, and the administrator. Chewie's crossbow collided with Boba's chest, and once again, he was thrown off the platform. Leia saw Luke and her heart jumped with joy. He pushed his friend down the ramp and towards his friends, who were now being ambushed by stormtroopers. Lando got behind the wall as R2 whirred in excitement. Chewie started to fire back, and Luke was jarred by 3PO's sudden reaction when he saw Master Luke. How'd that happen? He pushed Han into the building as stormtroopers dropped to the ground, and Luke's friends followed him in. They were going to get Han to the Falcon, unfreeze him, and then get out of here. Luke told his friends that he needed to get back and join Master Yoda in defeating Vader. Leia was confused, but Lando pushed her forward. They had to get out of here. But now, in Leia's mind, there was no way they were going to leave Bespin without Luke. She formed a plan in her mind as she watched her friend bolt away into the fray again. Inside the carbon freezing chambers, lightsabers echoed away. Yoda and Vader weren't evenly matched, but they were holding each other at bay. Vader wasn't as fast as Yoda, which was his big disadvantage, but Yoda wasn't as strong. This made both of their fights equally as hard. Yoda couldn't hold off Vader's raw metallic power, and his opponent couldn't keep up with him. Yoda leapt back and stared Vader down. The former Jedi pointed his weapon at the Grand Master, asking him how it felt knowing his order was destroyed by two fallen Jedi. Yoda paused. Dooku and Anakin, two Jedi that had a hand in destroying the Order, a failure he had lived with for over 20 years, and now he could eradicate it for good. Yoda pulled his weapon to his chest and told Vader that a failure he had made with them would not be repeated again. The Jedi were more than an order. They were an idea that will long transcend the rule of their empire, an empire that wouldn't survive the decade. He had foreseen it. The Sith, like Vader, would be extinguished. Vader swung aggressively, demanding that Yoda release his grip on his son. He would not ruin another life with his failed philosophy. Yoda leapt over Vader's lightsaber and slashed his chest, bursting the panel open and sending him tumbling backwards. Yoda's eyes met Vader's soulless mask and asked what he had gained through his own philosophy. No happiness, no companions, no tranquility. He had nothing to fight for. He was loyal to a master that enslaved him, a master that did not give him freedom of choice. All of his life's work was to be something more than an ordinary Jedi, and now he was nothing less than an ordinary Sith, one who hadn't even broken the confines of a rule that his master didn't even follow. Vader ferociously attacked. Yoda jumped back, slashing a pipe over his head and using the Force to shoot the freezing air into Vader's face. He stumbled. Yoda didn't relent with his verbal assault, telling Vader that all he had to show for was a dead partner, one who would have resented who he became, and two children who didn't even care for him. Vader stumbled upon his following swing, and Yoda slipped under the massive overstep and sliced up. removing Vader's forearm and blasting with the Force, sending him into a different wall, cratering it. Just as Yoda turned back, he apologized. Anakin never deserved it, but Anakin's decisions, his actions, had consequences. Yoda had warned him of this before he left Coruscant for Kashyyyk, a conversation Yoda had relived every day for years, always looking back at the conversation from Anakin's perspective, and always seeing how the lesson wasn't wrong. It was interpreted wrong, which tragically for Yoda was beyond his control. Luke arrived, just as Yoda's cane hit his hand. Vader's breathing was unsteady as he tried to get up but fell over, not finding the strength to do it. Unlike Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, Yoda could not split the mask. He couldn't reveal Anakin, but he could break the man who wanted his freedom. Luke raised his lightsaber, preparing to do what he needed to do, and Yoda stopped him. A Jedi does not attack the undefended. Their weapons are only for defense, the Force only for knowledge. Trust that, Luke needed to do. Luke pointed his weapon at Vader, but he was right there. They could kill him. They could send a message to the Empire. Send a message that the Jedi were no better than the Sith. Time for Vader's penance would come. For now, they had more to accomplish. Leia knew she wouldn't leave the planet, so she and the Falcon paced around the city, avoiding TIE fighters and eventually Boba, who followed them in their pursuit. Luke put restraints on Vader and lugged him forward. They were going to commandeer his shuttle and get out of here. They faced little resistance from stormtroopers who had pretty much evacuated the city to get to the flagship. As they got to the shuttle, they could see the Falcon, and so they got into the vessel and used it as a way to cut off Imperial support. Luke piloted after the Falcon and disconnected his tracker. Despite calling off the Imperial ties, the bounty hunter still had a reward to catch. The Falcon was able to transmit their hyperspace coordinates to Luke and fix the hyperdrive before abandoning the system altogether. They eventually arrived at the Rebel fleet that was just beyond the rim of the galaxy. Vader would be locked down, his armor stripped of him, and he'd be given a back-to-tank and locked away, with the protection of Yoda to watch over him. It would be here where they would have to decide on how they would go forward. Yoda sat himself in meditation inside of Vader's medical room. Vader tried to break his concentration, but Yoda was 900 years old. He wouldn't be disrupted by insolence. Luke and Leia had learned of their lineage by this point, and Han was recovering from his little trip inside of carbon freezing, which wasn't too bad due to how short it was. Despite capturing Vader, Alliance leadership didn't think this was a total win. Yes, Vader was an important piece to Palpatine's military regime, but him being plucked out of their ranks didn't fundamentally change anything. Thrawn vanished overnight and the Empire revealed a Death Star. Krennic was killed on Scarif, then Tarkin over Yavin, and the Empire reacted by killing a third of Alliance leadership. Whatever they did, the Empire responded in vile proportion. They could parade around that they captured Vader, but he didn't have any political influence. The people who sided with the rebellion were in support, but showing off the capture of Vader wouldn't do much. They needed to strike closer at Palpatine's heart. Yoda, inversely, was having a vision. He could see cold floors, tanks filled with green liquid. He could feel darkness. Behind him, he saw a student, his true last student, a Jedi with a green lightsaber, and in front of them, a dark, evil Emperor. This vision jarred the Jedi Master from his meditation, and he looked to Anakin, whose eyes were fixated on him. He asked if Yoda had a vision of Exegol, and the Grand Master asked Vader where it was. The apprentice smiled. Creases on his cheeks were visible from behind the mask. He told Yoda that not just anyone could find the hidden world of the Sith. The former Grand Master wanted to know why, and Vader explained that not even he knew where it was. As this conversation was continuing, Luke walked into the room and looked down to his master, and then to his father. The conversation was explained to Luke, and he decided to try and convince Vader to take them. He was very against the idea initially, because going to Exegol with 2 Jedi would be a death sentence for him, but perhaps there was a silver lining in all of it. Instead of going for it immediately, Anakin bought his time, patiently waiting for his chance to get out of here. He believed that with Palpatine, they could destroy Yoda and save his son, so that's what he planned on doing, bringing Luke to the dark side and killing Master Yoda. For the next several months, Luke and Leia would begin to train with each other, under the guidance of Yoda, but Leia was far too aggressive. She came into the Force very naturally, just like her brother, but she used Anakin's lightsaber, which caused her a lot of anger. But this usage of Anakin's lightsaber gave Luke a chance to craft his own Jedi weapon, one with an emerald glow. When Vader finally caved, the Alliance was already back in the known galaxy. Taking the Millennium Falcon, Han, Chewie, Yoda, Luke, and Vader went to Mustafar, where they would gather a Sith Wayfinder from the Eye of Webbish Bog. Using the Sith relic, they would track it to Exegol inside the Falcon. Han moved the Corellian freighter all the way through the Red Honeycomb Zone, and they landed on the surface of the planet, just outside of a massive temple. Han and Chewie were instructed to leave the engines on and stay inside. It was decided by Yoda that Leia shouldn't come on this mission. His rationale was because she was too unbalanced. She could get frustrated easily, or she could be pulled to the dark side, especially if they ran into Palpatine. Plus, Alliance operations were closing in on a hidden Imperial base, one somewhere in the Outer Rim. When they landed on Exegol, Yoda climbed onto Luke's back, and the three of them walked into the temple. Vader was in front of Luke, and they walked towards a lift that dropped them into the underbelly of the massive structure. Nothing could be heard aside from Vader's breathing. His breathing was still broken. His armor had not been replaced since Bespin. Vader walked without his hand, with cuts across his armor, and he limped. Inside the Nebulon B frigate he was stationed on, he was allowed out of the bacta tank and treated fairly. But Vader was not given the chance to walk in his suit. They were humane in their treatment of him, and they did use him as a propaganda piece, showing that they had defeated Vader, but they were not torturing him. This was the Alliance way of doing things. Regardless, they walked into a lab in the temple for the first time, and they saw huge tanks sitting idly. Some of them held creatures, deformed by Sith science. Out by the entrance of the temple where they had arrived, a young boy, guided by the only ally on the entire system he had, fled into the Millennium Falcon, avoiding detection from Han and Chewie, who were arguing over a game of Dajarek, with their comlink on the seat next to them, waiting for Luke and Yoda. The boy, named Confronting Palpatine, was able to sneak into the smuggler's hold and hide there, hoping for a chance at real freedom, away from his evil father and Palpatine's loyal Sith cult. Vader stumbled before a great throne, one where Sidious was eagerly waiting. He knew that Vader would betray him, and he also knew that his student had become interested in the path of the Sith. It was originally planned for Vader and the ancient Sith hunter Ochia Bestoon to come to the Sith world, but now he would kill the Jedi and his apprentice. Upon seeing his apprentice's condition, Sidious realized that not even the bond of his son could truly turn him. Truthfully, Vader only hoped that Luke would come to the dark side. There was kind of a blurred line for him. Yoda didn't want Luke and Vader to have too much time alone, so Vader was sort of resentful towards that. Plus, he wouldn't join Yoda. His only care was for Luke and Leia, one of which didn't even want anything to do with him. Palpatine caught a glimpse of a little pointy-eared green being hovering on the shoulders of a Jedi dressed in all black. It couldn't be. He had survived. Yoda leapt off and landed with the youthful energy, similar to how they had before. He looked at Sidious and poked at him. Surprised? Sidious looked to Vader, who knelt, and told his apprentice that he had done well. It was time for the Jedi to end. The Sith cult from around the arena opened up into an evil, dastardly chant. Sidious raised his hands, calling them his loyal servants, promising them a day to be remembered. Sidious stepped forward and unleashed a barrage of blue electricity that slammed into Yoda's palms. He held it there and continued using the power of the light and harvesting it, before launching it back at Sidious. He used his hand to deflect it. This contest would not be won of the blade, rather the Force. Luke's green lightsaber ignited. Deja vu. Yoda turned to Sidious and ignited his own blade. As Sidious prepared to open a torrent of Force powers, Vader's lightsaber was flung into his hand and he ignited it, to defend himself from Yoda's ferocious swing. He ducked and spun out of the way. Luke moved in, not even acknowledging his father, who still knelt. He had turned over to see his son join Yoda though. A realization crossed Vader's mind, one defining this as the truth. Luke would never turn to the dark side. His heart was too pure, unlike himself. His connection to Yoda was even stronger than Vader realized. He watched green and red cascade across the humongous arena of the Sith. The chants echoed out in the background, dwarfing their size amongst a sea of faceless creatures. Yoda leapt over Luke, who parried a strike before blocking another and being forced from his feet. Sidious didn't do much training anymore, but all the muscle memory remained. His weapon slid to the side and clashed with Yoda's, creating a shine that lit the chambers, light versus dark again. Yoda leapt upwards before being launched into the Sith throne with the Force. The massive royal seat tumbled over on top of the Grand Master. Vader's gaze quickly shifted from where Yoda was to his son, who got off the ground and swung forward. He collided blades with the Sith Master, who drove his weapon in vicious stabs. Luke avoided every last one, with not more than a few centimeters to spare. He spun around before getting clobbered with a strike that sent his green lightsaber spiraling off in the distance. Luke fell backwards and looked at Sidious. His yellow teeth and yellow eyes were all that were visible under the shadow of the dark robe. He towered over Luke, looking to his many loyalists and laughing in a heinous cackle. The Sith Eternal chanted back at their evil master, and with this, Sidious raised Vader's lightsabers, Luke saw his life flash before his eyes, before the ignition of another blade drew his attention. Sidious felt cold, and then warmth. Green lit his chest, and he turned over to Vader, who ripped the weapon out of his back and slashed him down across the neck, killing the evil Emperor in one swift strike. Chaos erupted. The Sith Eternal let out evil howls, one signaling a rising attack. Luke, who was helped off the ground by his father, told him that it was done. This was his chance to have a good life. Vader planted Luke's Jedi weapon into his hand and told him to go. Luke asked why, and Vader told him that he was the last of the Sith. They needed to die with him, and die forever. The galaxy needed to be cherished by those who deserved it. This was not a fate for Luke. Vader looked to the Sith Eternal who charged in, and stepped towards them. Luke grabbed his dad's shoulder and told him that he needed to save him, and without a second of hesitation, Vader removed his mask. The yellow eyes that Luke had grown accustomed to vanished, and blue filled them. A soft smile radiated, and Anakin told his son that he had already saved him. Anakin marched towards the Horde as Luke ran to grab Yoda, lifting him out of the rubble and carrying him through the maze and out to the Falcon. As they got closer to the Falcon, howls of the Sith Eternal dying could be heard, and following it came the rumbling of the ground. Out in the distance, a small starship vanished into hyperspace, and Luke brought Yoda into the Falcon, and it took off as soon as Luke's first Chanel boot touched the ramp. The Sith were destroyed. Yoda's recovery would come, but first came the Battle of Endor, one helmed by an admiral with full control over the fleet and the second Death Star itself. Luke would join his friends in his X-Wing, while Lando flew the Millennium Falcon into battle. The war for the galaxy hadn't finished yet, and despite Palpatine being claimed as dead for months leading up to Endor, that didn't matter. What did matter was Imperial Moffs uniting in the absence of their Emperor. Operation Cinder was enacted, along with several others, and despite mutinies happening across the galaxy, the Empire continued strong. Admiral Piet did not allow the rebellion to get his hands on information regarding Death Star 2. They happened to be great at being spies, and that's how they got it. Now that the Alliance was here, they were in for a world of pain. Despite the Alliance getting troops on the ground, it wasn't as simple as it sounded. AT-STs layered the forest floor. AT-ATs were everywhere, and Rebel forces with Leia, Han, and Chewie worked extremely hard to get the shield over the Death Star down. But that wasn't the biggest problem. Admiral Piet lured the Rebel fleet into a standoff with him and his Star Destroyers. Admiral Akbar, on the other hand, couldn't maintain a full-blown assault of this magnitude. The Rebel fleet was at its most powerful at this point, but the Alliance couldn't manage taking pot shots from the Death Star, which were obliterating vessels one at a time. In a way to cover themselves, Admiral Akbar decided that, with the way the Star Destroyers were designed, the rebellion would find the most success hiding on the far east flank, putting Imperial Star Destroyers between them and the Death Star. Because Piet wasn't trying to lure the rebels into a trap, he had everything prepared for defending the Death Star, so after the shield was destroyed, a number of Imperial warships came to the rescue, planting themselves in front of the entrance tunnels to the reactor. This left Luke and Lando in a bind, as they were forced to split off and find another way in. The Rebel forces on the ground were also facing trouble. Due to the sheer size of the Imperial force on the ground, they were left to retreat into the forest, using the aid of Ewoks to assist them. However, their traps were not effective against AT-ATs. Instead, Rebel commandos looked for other ways to take down the walkers. With Captain Rex with them, he guided Han and Chewie to a ridge where they could mount the walker and capture it for themselves. The massive Imperial force on the ground was routed by the betrayal of one of their own walkers. Han and Chewie laughed to each other on the inside, as Rex forced the other Imperial troopers out of the back. In space, the Executor Super Star Destroyer started to open up its full barrage of firepower against the Rebel fleet, with the Alliance in desperate position. Admiral Akbar evacuated his Home 1 type MC-80 and told them to move all command to General Calrissian and General Syndulla. The alarms on his capital ship started to blare, and as the crew started to evacuate to other Mon Cala ships in the fleet, he grabbed the controls and pulled the massive ship to the side. Only a few members of his crew remained with him on the bridge, as they raised the forward shields. Admiral Piet ordered all firepower from the Executor onto that capital ship, but it didn't work. Home 1 collided with the Executor, shredding it, and sending a ripple explosion outwards into the Imperial fleet. On the far side of the flank, by the Death Star, the rebels brought some Corellian corvettes, being that they were too small to be hit by the super weapon on the Death Star. With them came a wing of B-Wings, who unloaded all their firepower into the light Imperial cruisers, blocking the road for the reactor shaft. With Admiral Piet out of the way, the Empire was scrambling for new leadership, but with Syndulla leading the Rebel fleet from the Ghost, the Alliance was able to gather itself with the loss of Akbar. Luke and Lando piled all their blaster fire into the hull of an Arquitens-class cruiser, and it busted. thanks to the aid of corvettes and B-Wings. This gave Red 5 and the Falcon a chance to repeat history. They sped down the shaft with Wedge following in behind them. They avoided blaster fire from Imperial TIEs that chased in after them. Luke led the way, ducking and weaving through scaffolding as Lando flew his old ship with perfection, except for one small dent on the roof. That was too close. They whipped down another corridor, and Luke, with chills rolling down his spine, could feel Ben Kenobi with him again. But this time, he was a Jedi Knight. This time, he truly understood the Force that he trusted. They broke out into the reactor, and Luke saw the massive cell, launching his first round of torpedoes into the massive object. Lando was right behind him, unloading everything the Falcon had into the structure. It started to slip, and Luke dropped his last torpedoes, spinning around the reactor and slicing through a couple TIE interceptors behind them. Lando spun back around, with Wedge following suit. They pressed themselves to the construction shaft, avoiding all the same obstacles before they broke out on the far side of the weapon, watching the flames of the explosion chase them away, but never affecting them. Luke and Lando split off into different directions as they joined General Syndulla on the attack of the rest of the Imperial fleet, which was now crumbling into disunion, ships slamming into each other and the lot of it. When it was over, there'd be time for a giant celebration on Endor. The Empire wasn't destroyed, but hope had been restored to the galaxy. Footage of the second Death Star was making rounds around the galaxy, from Tatooine all the way to Coruscant. The Empire was now on its back legs. Months without Palpatine, even longer without Vader, and now a loss of a second space station. With their victory, the rebellion renamed itself into the New Republic to legitimize their movement in the eyes of the galaxy. Their celebration was shared galaxy-wide, and Yoda, who was inside of one of the Mon Cala vessels during the battle, was able to be there for the celebration. A hope filled his heart. He had seen thousands of celebrations across his time, and none compared to this. He sat quietly, watching over the youth as they saw their chance, their moment for triumph to present itself, and they made it happen. Following Endor, the New Republic would pounce on all cylinders. With Operation Cinder being active for the few months since Palpatine's death, there wasn't really anything the Empire could do to maintain its military force. However, despite the rise of Imperial Moths trying to maintain control over the Empire, there were those that put their faith into something else. One of those that escaped from the Sith Eternal on Exegol was a clone, one deformed by the darkness he was created by. Snoke, with very little understanding of his purpose, decided that in the shadow of the Empire, he would use his darkness to restructure the Imperial regime in his name. With those who served the Emperor looking for a new place to put their faith in, they trusted Snoke. This wasn't everyone, obviously, but Snoke being infused with Palpatine's blood, and the blood of hundreds of other beings, Jedi, and Force-sensitive prodigies killed off in infancy, he was the creation of pure evil, fueled by the horrid nature of his life force. Of course, there were those who believed he was too evil or a step in the wrong direction, but the Empire was desperate, and when tyranny is pushed to desperation, it reacts. With Coruscant under siege from a civilian-started civil war, the Empire was forced to abandon station, thanks to Admiral Gallius Rax deciding to not protect Mas Amedda on the ground. Snoke did something the Imperial Remnant wouldn't have done without him. They moved to confront the Alliance head-on, with its full power, without hiding resources or planning for an eventual rise in the future. With Exegol gone, there was no return of Palpatine, nothing in their future to fight for. Snoke was their future, at least for those who subscribed to his movement. There were those that had to make other arrangements, but Snoke, with the full might of the loyal Imperial military at his disposal, used it. He blindsided the rebel fleet at Sullust, which put a miniature end to their celebrations following Endor. Snoke understood that instead of spreading themselves thin, they needed to focus on finding the rebel force that had won at so many battles and beating them in a head-on engagement. The rebellion was growing. The Alliance was formed through people around the galaxy, but if they could cripple the Alliance fleet, then they could win this war. Due to the vastness of the Imperial arsenal, he was able to seize advantage over the rebels following their victory at Endor, because they were still licking their wounds, whereas the Empire had more resources to pull from. Snoke's rise was fueled by fear, and he continued to push that out, dispatching a Super Star Destroyer to wipe out a rebel group of the Imperial Remnant, killing Moff Gideon in the process. To Snoke, it wasn't about solidarity, it was about sending a message. With so little time to function and no true understanding of his creation, he wanted to create carnage and chaos, and he accomplished it, forcing Imperial remnants not aligned with his faction to join or disband entirely. This left the rebellion with an issue. They had the support of the galaxy, but they didn't have the backing of a true military presence to stop Snoke's continuous fleet movements. Luckily, they had some amazing personnel on their side. Individuals that could use the might of the Imperial Remnant against itself. Using trackers stolen from Imperial vessels and a couple stolen interdictors, Generals Syndulla, Calrissian, and Solo came up with an idea, a risky one at that. Since the Snoke Reformation was working as one united fleet and moving around and popping rebel cells, they would trap them. The rebels would send them to Eridu to cut off other rebels, quote-unquote, and when they got there, they'd find a couple of trackers, and following that, using the interdictors, the rebels could pull their own ships out of hyperspace and surround the Imperial fleet. Using their few quasars, like the ones General Syndulla captured before Scarif, they could deploy Y-Wings, B-Wings, and MG-100 star fortresses, surround the Empire, and crush them. It was a dedicated assault. So, just as planned, the Alliance gathered everyone they had, after months of being beaten back by the Snoke Reformation. Whether this fighting force was freedom fighters, volunteers, or old war vets, they were ready. The battle started with nothing. The Imperial fleet under Snoke arrived. 2 Super Star Destroyers were gathered in the middle of the fleet. Surrounding it were a number of regular ISD-2s and ISDs. Of course, there were the multitude of support ships. Snoke stood on the bridge of his Super Destroyer. The fact that he combined their fleets helped Imperial morale rise. They saw this fleet as the one that would bring destruction to the Alliance, and after that, they could infringe their rule in the galaxy. They prepared for combat, and when it came, they were not as prepared as they believed. From behind, the entire Imperial fleet dropped a fleet of winged MC-80s. With them came the full Quasar fleet, which deployed dozens of MG-100 star fortresses. Alongside them were the cover fire of Rogue Squadron, the Falcon, the Ghost, and Red 5. The MGs were bunker busters, typically used for ground assaults, but General Syndulla believed that they could be used here, and they should be. With the Empire facing the complete opposite direction of the Rebel fleet, they could do extensive damage in hyperspace out of combat. The MGs exited the Quasars and pushed forward. The New Republic fleet opened fire on the Empire from behind. Despite the surprise attack, destroyer shields were still strong, in comparison to Mon Cala weaponry. Snoke's admirals tried to turn the fleet around, but it was nearly impossible. The rebels came out swinging, and the Empire wasn't really able to strike except with a few rare turbolasers at the end of their ships. The Star Doritos turned themselves around slowly as light cruisers pulled around ships only to get obliterated by Republic starships. TIEs entered the fray but were cut off by veteran rebel pilots, who shattered the backbone of the Imperial fighter navy that joined the fight. The MGs cruised in, getting hit by heavy flak but holding strong. The leader of the fleet of the bombers was able to get over the first Super Star Destroyer, and they unloaded their entire payload. Thousands of bombs were pressed out of their chambers and detonated on the surface of the Super Destroyer, ripping first through the shields and then crushing the bridge of the ship. Due to the Empire facing away from the Alliance upon arrival, they could not defend themselves from being clobbered from the backside. The Star Fortress bombers, after dropping their payload, readied their hyperdrives and departed the system completely, after absolutely destabilizing a Super Star Destroyer. The Imperial fleet was caught in a bind. As they were finally getting themselves turned to the side with one last Super Star Destroyer, most of it facing west, a fleet came out from the east. This time, supporting an array of Y-Wings, which were much faster than the MGs that had already claimed a kill. The rebels used their traditional hit-and-run tactics, but this time with an actual fleet. With a full bomber fleet of Y-Wings, the New Republic had no intention to leave. The Star Fortresses were way too big to remain in the battle, but Y-Wings could hold their own in a dogfight, which allowed them to get a jump on a number of Imperial 2s, catching their shields and destroying them in the process. Some of these destroyers were crippled, but most of them remained sturdy, just without proper shielding. The rebel fleets converged on their target, with the final Super Star Destroyer getting into position to unload most of its firepower into the 2 fleets. Another fleet dropped out of hyperspace, this time releasing the faster and more agile B-Wing bombers, which went straight for the final Super Capital ship, hitting it from behind. This is the Super Capital ship that Snoke happened to be in. The blast would cripple the Super Destroyer, killing everyone in the bridge, including Snoke, and sending the Imperial fleet into another discombobulated mess. The final Rebel fleet, which was the alternative fleet that came in from the west, came in to help finish off the job. Alliance leaders didn't know which way the Empire would turn around if they did, so if they turned to the east, they'd have something from the west, and vice versa. Perfect usage of their fleet and their limited numbers. Targeting the Imperial Super Destroyers was the key to winning this, and so were the bunker busters that crippled Imperial morale within the first few minutes of the battle by destroying one Super Star Destroyer. With the Snoke Reformation destroyed over Eridu, and the very few Imperial loyalists remaining, it was time for true change to begin. Because Snoke targeted other Imperials, There were nothing more than a couple 100,000 Imperial soldiers and officers remaining, none of them with the plans to ensure the rebirth of the Empire or beginning of the First Order. All of those ideas would die with them in the unknown regions. The New Republic would certify itself as the government of the galaxy, and work to re-establish order. If they could do that, then they could topple the influence left over from the Empire. Due to the way the Empire died out, especially with public infighting thanks to Snoke, many who would have stayed loyal, quietly, lost their faith. The Empire was a dead cause, one completely destroyed by the presence of an individual hell-bent on chaotic control. While the New Republic had large shoes to fill, it would get started with legacy leadership. A new Jedi Order, on the other hand, had the perfect route for starting. Young Skywalker had much to learn, and an eager Grand Master was ready to teach, but they would not repeat their Dagobah days with each other. What they needed were different paths. Luke's quest for adventure needed to be satisfied in a way the Jedi could allow, finding relics and knowledge. Yoda would restart the Order on Ossus with ANT droids that helped build a new training temple. Luke would go across the galaxy with his friends, and make some new ones along the way, like Lor San Tekka. Those Luke found with the potential to be Jedi were brought back to the Grand Master, one who continued to maintain his youthful energy, and continued training the next generation of Jedi. When Luke returned full-time, he'd be given similar responsibilities, one that would grant him the role of Grand Master. Leia and Han's son Ben would still join the Order, and he'd be raised as a Jedi should, this time without the influence of ghosts long gone or shadows hiding in secrecy. Thanks to Dathan's survival, a dyad in the Force would be formed in this new Jedi Order, one that would carry on the legacy of those who helped create it. Outside of Ossus, the galaxy would need its time to heal, and that time would be challenging on all sides. But thanks to the bravery and unity of the New Republic and the galaxy, the dark shadow of the Empire was extinguished, and with it, the legacy of the Sith. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexander Reese, The Beginning and End, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, Jango Fett Clone, Nick5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tib, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granny Debane, Laliet, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cully Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weaver 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, John Nguyen, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Forrest Lisa Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, Me 3 First Names, Darksing 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button, supporting ways. Check out the other things, cool things on the other things. Let's talk about this story. I feel like the only way to get Yoda off of Dagobah is if he was training the entire time and then being found by Luke and being just ready to go. I try to keep the fights as balanced as possible just to keep them as entertaining as possible, as I typically do. But I really like the idea of like a 900-year-old Yoda just going in and just having a hard time because he's 90 years old, but he's still like kind of kicking it, you know? He's still going crazy, he's still doing his thing. The reason the Jedi struggled so much in Exegol is because it is a hive of dark side. When Rey goes there, she literally dies to kill Palpatine. She literally gives her life to die, and so it's kind of the same thing with Yoda getting tossed aside and Luke getting tossed aside. It's Vader's completing that sacrifice to die so that others can live on. As for the final two battles, I really kind of wanted to have the Snoke Reformation kind of be the end of the Imperial Remnant. Without Exegol, there's no direction for a future First Order. All of it kind of dies with the Empire. And I wanted to kind of emphasize the idea that Snoke is going to turn on the other Imperial Remnants to make his remnant stronger. And it does make it stronger, but superior tactics at the end of the day is what wins it. And I think Hera is the general to kind of lead that push. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always, my friends, may the Force be with you.